Hello again, students. We are on page 3 in your passages book, exercise 3. We are going to take a closer look at phrasal verbs. I introduced them in exercise 1. So we're going to talk about how some phrasal verbs can be considered separable and some you cannot separate or are called inseparable. And we'll look at a couple of other items too. Okay, here's that definition of what a phrasal verb is that I went over in exercise 1, so you can read this again. But I want to get right into what is a separable phrasal verb. So a separable phrasal verb can take its object before or after the particle. If the object is a pronoun, it always appears before the particle. Okay, so let's look at an example. A friend is someone who brings out the best in you. Okay, so here's our phrasal verb, brings out. Now, the object of this verb is this phrase right here, the best in you. Brings out what? The best in you. Okay, so we actually have an object and then a prepositional phrase. So this object, the best, in a separable phrasal verb, such as bring out. Not all phrasal verbs are separable, but this one is. We can move this object to the middle position, meaning put it after the main verb and before the particle. So we can say it this way, brings out the best in you, or we can say a friend is someone who brings the best out in you. Okay, so we have separated the main verb and the particle. So another example would be cheer up. Cheer up is also a separable phrasal verb. So here we have a friend is someone who cheers you up when you're feeling bad. In this case, the object is the word you. Okay. And when you have a pronoun, you must put the pronoun in between the main verb and the particle in a separable phrasal verb. It has to go in the middle, it can't go after. Okay. Now, some phrasal verbs are inseparable. Okay. You're going to learn what they are probably by just having to look them up um, and find out if you can separate them or not, if you're not familiar with them. But inseparable phrasal verbs do not allow you to move the object to the middle position. The object must come after the phrasal verb. Okay, so for example, run into is one of those types. So here's your sentence. Good friends are always happy to help when you run into a problem. So you cannot say run a problem into. Cannot do that. This is an inseparable phrasal verb. All right. Now, 3-word phrasal verbs have a particle. So the first particle here is on, and then the second one is considered an actual preposition. Okay, particle preposition. Objects must go after 3-word phrasal verbs. There's nowhere to insert them. You cannot separate them. Okay, make new friends, but hang on to the old ones. And some phrasal verbs have no objects. These are called intransitive. So any verb that has no object is called an intransitive verb. So we also have intransitive phrasal verbs. Okay, so in that case, you shouldn't be using any object. True friends don't drift apart. So drift apart is a phrasal verb that is intransitive. All right, so let's take a look at some examples here. So it says, look at the starting point on page 2. Can you find the phrasal verbs which are separable, inseparable, and or 3-word verbs which are also intransitive? Write them in the chart. Okay, so you are going to do that on your own, and then when we come back to class, I will check those with you. But let's look at exercise B. So we are going to do a few of these together, and we can see whether or not we can separate the phrasal verbs. Okay, for example, number 1, have you ever had a friend who it says bring out and the worst? Okay, so here's our phrasal verb, here's our object. Can we separate bring out? Yes, we can. So we can put it in between. Um, well, first, let's talk about putting it at the end. Brought out the worst, or we can separate it and say brought the worst out. So you can do it both ways because it is a separable phrasal verb. So let's look at number 2. Have you ever, it says, run into a friend that you hadn't seen in a long time? All right, do you remember that we said run into is an inseparable phrasal verb? So there is only one option. You're going to have to write run into a friend. Run into a friend. Okay, and that is your only option. Run into a friend. Number 3, do you usually, and then we have stand up for, and then the object, your friends, when other people criticize them. All right, stand up for is a 3-word phrasal verb. So if you recall, we cannot separate 3-word phrasal verbs. So we will just leave it with the object coming after. Stand up for your friends. I'm not going to write that in. Hopefully, you're listening carefully. We cannot separate it. Do you usually stand up for your friends when other people criticize them? All right, number 4. Can you, okay, we have do without a cell phone and still keep in touch with friends? Well, if you did exercise A, or you just might know that do without is inseparable. So again, we cannot separate it. We're going to just write, can you do without a cell phone and still keep in touch with friends? Okay, so there again, you have only one option. Number 5, when friends, I'm going to move this down. Oops. Okay, my arrow keys aren't working. Let's try up. When friends ask you for a favor, do you usually say yes, or do you, okay, now we have turn down them. I wanted to get to number 5 because here we have a pronoun. Do you remember the rule of when you have a pronoun, what you're supposed to do? Yes, you only have one option. Pronouns must go in between. They must be separated. So we need to say, or do you turn them down? I'm going to write that one in. Okay. So we cannot say turn down them. We must say turn them down. All right. I hope this was enough for you to get an idea of what we need to do with our phrasal verbs. How some of them are separable, some of them are inseparable, some of them are intransitive and don't have any objects, so there's no issue there. But you need to know what kind of phrasal verb you're working with. See you next time.